just so we have a perspective, and if anybody doesn't know, there is a huge conflict going on right now between Israel and Palestine. It is in the news at the moment, of course. There's still all the stuff going on with Russia, which the world just seems to have forgotten about. So hopefully Ukraine is doing well. But if we take a look right here, just to give everybody a little bit perspective, it's interesting they have this marked out too on Google Maps. Israel and Palestine go way back. The quick summary, and I'm probably going to make a lot of people angry with this, is that the Palestinians have lived there forever. The Israelis, which are majority Jewish, they got kicked out of the rest of the world. They settled themselves in Israel, which is a relatively holy place for them. And there is basically they forced their way into living there, and they're on very rocky ground because the Palestinians are they're people, they're human beings, but it's also not a highly educated and a highly civilized area per se. And the Jews in the area with Israel are very highly educated and lots of technology, and I'll find better ways to sum. We're getting better at this, guys. I'll get my newscaster set up. So that means that the Palestinians are violently against the Israelis because there has been an extreme power gap between the two. When we're talking about the Gaza Strip, I think this is really important to note how small the Gaza Strip is. If you were to take a look at any other area, there are cities in the United States that are bigger than the Gaza Strip. So you can imagine a lot of these attacks actually happen really within your like viewing distance. If you look outside your window as far as you can, very good chance that's the distance that we're talking about in terms of this conflict. Now, I would argue nobody's in the right here. The Israelis, they have nowhere else to go, but they're also a little aggressive too in how they've set themselves up. A little bit aggressive, a lot aggressive. And the Palestinians have taken on to guerrilla-style Third World Warfare, where recently too they basically invaded a music festival, which is insane. They killed a few hundred people. So just some context on that. Gaza is known for being exceptionally poor. If you zoom in, you can really see a lot of these houses and buildings are not what we'd consider up to date and modern. There are a lot, and there's schools and parks and whatnot, but running water and electricity is pretty scarce. If we go out towards, oh my gosh, out towards the rest of Israel, you can see why the Palestinians would be kind of pissed off, because everything else, there's lots of land, there's lots of farms. If you go to the main cities too, which I really wish, actually, I have an old friend who is Israeli, and I don't know much about this, the area, so she was on to be able to talk to him a little bit, and I'd know a little bit more about the context of the cities, but there's a very big difference, a stark difference in wealth between these two areas. So that being said, now we're going to finally get to the article here to take a look, because it looks like yesterday there was some bombing. Israeli military strikes killed multiple civilians Saturday at a UN shelter. Yeah, so I'll point out too, not to stop immediately again, but this is a little bit older. Is this? We'll take a look. We'll read the article here. So there's been multiple strikes, anyways, on the Palestinians, which barbarism calls for barbarism. That's the way I'll take it, is when one side acts like animals, the other side also acts like animals. Doesn't matter how technologically advanced they are. It's a little, so they've been going back and forth for a few weeks now. On the Gaza Strip, Israeli military strikes killed multiple civilians Saturday at a UN shelter and hospital in the main combat zone in the Gaza Strip as the assault intensified on the besieged enclaves, Hamas rulers, amid growing international uproar over the soaring death toll and deepening humanitarian crisis. Of course, this is terrible on both sides. Hamas is known for putting a lot of their civilian or a lot of their military infrastructure inside civilian infrastructure, and the critique on both sides is that both sides are using human shields. Hamas is putting military bases inside civilian zones, while the Israelis are putting civilians inside military zones, or at least whatever's seen as military zones. So it's a lot scary. Israel's military said that it encircled Gaza City, the largest of its offense. I can't even read. Israel's military said it encircled Gaza City, the target of its offensive to crush Hamas, but on Saturday offered a 3-hour window for residents trapped by the fighting to flee south. There's a big critique too that they have nowhere to go, so saying, hey, get out of this area, we're going to bomb it. It isn't, it's not, 3 hours is a lot to pick up your whole life and move. The new attacks came as the U.S. Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, was in the region seeking ways to ease the plight of civilians caught in the fighting. He met with Arab Foreign Minister on Saturday in Jordan, the day after talks in Israel with the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who insisted there could be no temporary ceasefire until all hostages by Hamas are released. So, of course, Hamas, the leaders of Palestine, which some might argue are two different people, they have started to invade Israeli land, which is not, it's where it's like conflicted. Is it Israeli? Is it Palestinian? And this is the Israelis coming back and going, hey guys, get the hell out. This is our area. So it is, of course, disputed land. And that's kind of what's going on there. I'll point out too, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is known for being a little bit authoritarian. If you haven't seen him, he actually had an interview on the Lex Friedman podcast. And yes, overall, it seems like he's a good person. The impression that I got is he's very ideologically driven. There was a lot of language that if you take away the ideology, or if you take away anything else, you're only left with ideology. So I'm not going to critique the Lex Friedman podcast, but if you haven't checked it out, definitely go take a peek. Egyptian officials said they and Qatar were proposing humanitarian pause for 6 to 12 hours daily to allow aid and casualties to be evacuated. They were also asking Israel to release a number of women and elderly prisoners in exchange for hostages held by Hamas, suggestions Israel seems unlikely to accept. They spoke on conditions of anonymity because they were not authorized to brief the press on the discussions. The Israeli military has repeatedly demanded that northern Gaza's 1.1 million residents flee south as it escalates bombardment of the north and tightens the noose around Gaza City. However, some of those traveling south were killed during their journey in the recent days, and Israel has continued to bomb the south, saying it is striking Hamas targets. Now, it kind of is on both ends, and it kind of isn't on the other end, because Hamas is, again, we have to remember, Hamas is extremely well integrated with the culture and this, well, with the society of the Palestinians. Some may say that for every single other society out there, but they put their military bases inside hospitals, where a lot of other people, they'll put their military bases away from hospitals, so if the military base gets bombed, the hospital is unarmed. That is just like a different fundamental in the way, of course, that people think and do things. They don't see anything wrong with it, because to them, everybody is kind of one person. Everybody is a collective group. So we have to be a little bit cautious. This is where, of course, things have to be cautious when talking about it, and even how addressing this whole system works. Anyways, let's Cyberpunk. Let's switch the music up here too. With wide swaths of residential neighborhoods leveled in airstrikes, most of northern Gaza's remaining residents, estimated around 300,000, have sought shelter in UN-run schools and hospitals, where they hope they'll be safe. But deadly Israeli strikes have also repeatedly hit and damaged those shelters. On Saturday, 2 strikes hit a UN school-turned-shelter just north of Gaza City, killing several people in tents, and the schoolyard and women who were baking bread inside the building, according to the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. Initial reports indicated 20 people were killed, but the agency has not yet been able to verify the figure, said spokeswoman Juliet Touma. The health minister in Hamas-run Gaza reported that 15 people were killed at the school, where thousands have sought shelter, and another 70 people wounded. Also Saturday, 2 people were killed by a strike by the gate Also Saturday, 2 people were killed in a strike by the gate of Nazir Hospital in Gaza City, according to Medad Abbas, spokesman for the health ministry. Let's go take a look and actually see where the Nazir Hospital is. We'll pull up Google Maps or Google Earth again. Nazir Hospital, so right in the south. If we zoom in a little bit, this is the supposed hospital that was bombed. Supposed, but it was. Sorry, let me rephrase that. It was bombed. There's been a lot of debate too about where these things come from. This specific bombing, I'm not sure, but keep in mind too, there have been reports that Palestine has been bombed by Israel in certain areas, but it turned out it was the Palestinians and their failed rockets. So just keep that in mind while looking through here. And that's very, very deep into the Gaza Strip. About 1.5 million people in Gaza, or 70% of the population, have fled their homes, according to the UN. With food, water, and the fuel needed for generators that power the hospitals and other facilities running out, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, or I don't know how to say that, urged an immediate ceasefire to allow aid in. The humanitarian situation in Gaza is horrific. Guterres said late Friday in an unusually blunt statement. An entire population is traumatized. Nowhere is safe. I'm of 2 mindsets here too, guys. You have to keep in mind. If we take a look to the cliche, there is the corpo. I've been playing Cyberpunk 77 recently, so there's the corpos and there's like the street gangs. I'm of both mindsets. I believe one, corporate, clean, functional, efficient. I'm all for like positive, productive societies that educate and create. And I know there's obviously societies that are relatively opposite to that, but I do also realize too how the corporate mindset, I don't know how else to say it. I'll just use it as a corporate mindset, enables its own enemies. And that's a big thing that's happened here, is Israel seems to have enabled its own enemies by setting themselves down in an area and going, screw you guys, we're not moving. Now, of course, when you're up against a group of people who are not as, I don't know, technologically advanced as you, then there's not really negotiation on the table, and it takes a lot too. It's something interesting. The difference between like the United States and other places is that like the individual has relative negotiation power under the government, and when there is no government and you're doing versus 2 governments, there's a lot of things that go on there. So the Palestinians are absolutely traumatized. Obviously the Israelis are also absolutely traumatized. It seems like one big trauma pile, and nothing's good is going to come from it. Guterres said that he had not forgotten the slaughter of civilians at the hands of Hamas militants when they launched their attack on Israel almost a month ago, but said civilians and civilian infrastructure must be protected. He also said civilians must not be used as human shields, and called upon Hamas to release all of the roughly 240 hostages it has. The family of... Oh my god, I can't read. Wow. The family home of Hamas exiled leader Ismail Haniyeh in the Saudi refugee camp on the northern edge of Gaza City the family home of Hamas exiled leader Ismail Haniyeh in the Shati refugee camp on the northern edge of Gaza City was hit Saturday morning by an airstrike, according to the Hamas-run media office in Gaza. It has no immediate details on damage or casualties. And there was no immediate comment. Okay. Overnight strikes also hit the western outskirts of the city near Al-Quds hospital in Gaza City. Another strike hit a building close to the entrance of the hospital's emergency ward on Saturday afternoon, injuring at least 21, the Palestinian Red Crescent said. I'm a little bit... So again, even though I do agree and want to say, of course, Palestinians are in a very rough spot, a lot of the times, at least the information comes out, doesn't seem very consistent from them. And that I feel is a little bit dangerous. There's been quite a few times where I feel like, and I'm not going to go into the exact examples, but we can get into it at some point in time, where they're like, hey, this many people died. You watch the footage, or you go see photos. It's like, well, it doesn't seem like it's that. Why did I just get the live online thing from Wisebot? What are you doing, Wisebot? We've been live for a while here. Interesting. Okay. Where was... Yeah. Despite Israelis' call for civilians to flee the south, strikes have continued there as well. Raed Matar, who is sheltering in a school in the southern town of Khan Yonis after fleeing the north early in the war, said Saturday he regularly heard explosions, apparently from airstrikes. People never sleep, he said. The sound of explosions never stop. In the center of Khan Yunis, an airstrike early Saturday destroyed the home of a family, with the first responders pulling 3 bodies and 6 injured people from the rubble. Among those killed was a child, according to the Associated Press, cameraman at the scene. The Israeli militaries said ground forces were also now operating in the south, with an armored and engineering corps working to remove booby traps from buildings. During the operation, the military said fighters were seen exiting a tunnel, and they were killed by Israeli troops. The military said that there were also numerous attacks staged from tunnels on Israeli forces in the northern Gaza Strip. I've seen some footage too of these tunnels. Underground tunnels. Super sketchy. Elsewhere, skirmishes among Israel's northern border continued Saturday morning, as the Israeli military said it had struck militant cells in Lebanon, trying to fire at Israel as well as a Hezbollah observation post. Throughout the war, Israel and Hezbollah, an ally of Hamas, have traded fire almost daily among the Lebanese border, raising fears of a new front opening there. On Friday in Tel Aviv, on the 3rd trip to Israel since the war began, Blinken pushed U.S. President Joe Biden's calls for brief halt in the fighting to address the worsening humanitarian crisis. But Netanyahu said there would be no humanitarian pause until Hamas releases all the hostages. So it's standstill at the moment. They say there's going to be negotiation if the hostages are released, but obviously the hostages are not going to be released. That's part of what Palestine has against Israel. If they released them, then and there would be nobody there, then Israel could easily just come in and carpet bomb the whole place. So they're not going to just give up all of their hostages, which means Israel is not going to stop pushing them. It's not going to stop fighting them. In addition to aid distribution, where am I to? On Saturday, he held meetings in Amman with diplomats from Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and the Palestinian Authority, who remain angry and deeply suspicious of Israel. In addition to aid distribution, allowing foreigners out and the release of hostages, Blinken is looking to get Jordan and other Arab states to begin to think about the future of Gaza if and when Israel succeeds in wresting control from Hamas. There was consensus among the Arab governments involved in discussions with the U.S. to resist any talks on the post-war period in Gaza before establishing ceasefire and allowing the delivery of more humanitarian aid and fuel to Gaza, according to Egypt officials. Ooh, we got one last section here. Casualties are rising. More than 9,400 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza so far, including more than 3,900 Palestinian children. The Gaza Health Ministry said, without providing a breakdown between civilian and fighters. Something to note too, Palestine apparently has a huge amount of young children, which means, damn it, their women are picking out kids like crazy. But it also means that they have a very young group of people that are relatively uneducated and extremely angry. So there's going to be a border, and especially too with, it seems like their culture, there is no difference between soldier and civilian, at least like the way that they're enacting things, which is not good. I want to point out, if we start blurring that line ourselves, or at least Israel starts blurring that line themselves, and which they looks like they are, then they're gonna just treat everybody like a soldier, which is it's a bit of a two-faced thing from Palestine, I'll point out, which is really frustrating, where like I've seen video footage of their women going, our children will die and be martyrs, and it's like, are you just breeding uneducated people to go in and die? So these figures are very, very rough. Maybe they have a good estimate about how many people are killed, but who is what and who is what, that's going to be a very, very blurry line. More than 1,400 people have been killed, or more than 1,400 people have died, have been killed on the Israeli side. I don't know why this language is weird. 9,400 Palestinians have been killed. And then more than 1,400 people have died on the Israeli side. They have been killed on the Israeli side. Civilians killed during Hamas's initial attacks. Thank you for at least saying at the very end. Rocket fired by Gaza militants into Israel persists, disrupting life for millions of people and forcing an estimated 250,000 people to evacuate. More rockets are intercepted. 24 Israeli soldiers have been killed in Gaza since the start of the ground operation. The overall toll is likely to rise dramatically as the assault on densely built-up Gaza City continues. More than 386 Palestinian dual nationals and wounded exited Gaza into Egypt on Friday, according to Wal Abu Ammar. Now, I will point out too, a lot of the other surrounding nations are supporting Palestine, but they are not accepting refugees, and they're not accepting the hundreds of thousands of people that live there. Why, if the big critique I have is, if they have a heart, why won't they take them in? Why won't they give them space? Look at these countries. There is nothing but space. Now, of course, you may go, well, they need water and infrastructure and whatnot to move into a space. But these are big countries, and there's a lot of oil money around this area. And something should be done, but it's not. This is a large conflict area. Even if you were to take a look at the map, there's no doubt that something is going to happen in that tiny little space here. It's just kind of given. Let's go take a look at that video that's at the top. Maybe we'll get some video footage of what's going on.
Days after Hamas's attack on October 7th, I came to Israel, followed soon thereafter by President Biden, to make clear that as long as the United States stands, Israel will never stand alone. Today, in my fourth visit to Israel since October 7th, I reiterated that in all my discussions with Prime Minister Netanyahu, President Herzog, the Security Cabinet. I reiterated and made clear our support for Israel's right to defend itself, indeed its obligation to defend itself. That includes through the additional assistance that we've worked with Congress, and we're working with Congress now to provide for Israel's defense, as well as for urgent humanitarian needs in Gaza. This right to self-defense, indeed this obligation to self-defense, belongs to every nation.
Something that's being really emphasized here, and it doesn't matter what side you're on, it's the ability of self-defense. There's something, of course, in the United States that a lot of other countries don't really apply, and it is that the individual is the sovereign citizen. Now, not sovereign citizen in the sense of sovereign, like you can drive your car without a license, which a lot of people think that's what that means. But what it does mean is that you're an individual responsible for your own actions, and every single person is an individual responsible for their own safety and security. That's why the Second Amendment exists, the gun one. The If I put this video up and that's the wrong amendment, I'm Canadian, guys. So just so you know, all I know is that you guys have the right to bear guns, bear arms, bear guns. And it's very, very different in their ideas. All the American policy behind this is going to be, well, if someone points a gun at you, you blow their frickin' head off. Simple as that. You pop them off. And it doesn't matter even if, let's say, you are in private property or something like that and someone attacks you. You have a right to at least some form of self-defense. Now, that's the basis that they're taking, is that basically whoever's being attacked can go ahead and kill everybody else. Simple as that. Which is obviously is not the best way of doing things. It's not like the way that you want to run things. But when it comes down to like considering the individual sovereign, they're considering every single Israeli sovereign, and that doesn't matter where you are on the planet. They can, if you go try and kill them, they can kill you back. Simple as that. And that's what it seems like. Now, of course, the question is where that comes from, and how do you know that someone's trying to kill you? And that's where, of course, the Palestinians have an idea back, and they're like, hey, they're trying to kill us, and they're trying to put us in Gaza, and they're trying to basically genocide us. But if you really think about like what the American sovereign person really means, it's that you can go anywhere and you still have the same rights to be able to defend yourself, in theory, right? Even if you're in some random neighborhood somewhere and you really need to sit there and survive, and someone else puts a gun to your head, you can pop them back. Not always true, not totally true, but that's going to be the mindset that we get from at least a lot of the Americans that come in there. Even if the Israelis shouldn't really be there, not saying they shouldn't, I'm not saying they shouldn't, but even if they shouldn't be there, the Americans are still going to side with the fact that, hey, if you're being attacked, you go back at them.
No country could or should tolerate the slaughter of innocents. You've heard me speak to some of the stories that Israelis have experienced.
I don't think I'm going to watch this whole video. It is a 27-minute video, and I'm not going to make another 40-minute-hour video out of this alone. So we will go on to the next topic here. Just a quick overview of what's going on with Israel and Palestine. We'll watch this for a few more seconds, see what he has to say. Maybe take a look and see if there's some footage from Palestine, from the Gaza Strip, and go from there.
On October 7th, today, we saw additional images, additional footage collected by the Israeli government from video cameras, some the terrorists own, others in communities that were attacked. It remains almost beyond the human capacity to process, to digest. I saw, for example, a family on a kibbutz, a father, two young boys, maybe 10, 11 years old, grabbing them, pulling them out of their living room, going through their very small backyard and into a shelter, followed seconds later by a terrorist who throws a grenade into that small shelter. And then as the father comes staggering out, shoots him down. And then the boys come out.
There's a big problem too. This type of warfare is warfare done by young men. Simple as that. Being a man, knowing what it's like to be a young man, when you're in the heat of the moment and if you're undertrained, bad things happen. There's a lot of hatred that can come from that. I think that's what Palestine is relying on, at least what it seems like, is there's a lot of young men who spend a lot of days sleeping on shitty beds, doing terrible jobs, being underfed, not being able to create lives, and then they're being let go on a relatively wealthy society. That's the real scary part, okay? Somebody who is willing to do that to someone else's family is so angry that they can't have a family of their own of some sort. They feel like nobody else deserves good things. So yes, they're terrorists, but there's a lot more than just calling them angry religious terrorists. It's complicated. It's very complicated. There's so much pain on both sides. Of course, I'm not justifying anything that happens to this family. This is not. That's what I'm pointing out. Is anybody willing to do something that terrible? They're living a life, man. They're living a crazy life.
And they run into their house. And the camera in the house is filming everything. And they're crying. "Where's Daddy?" One says. The other says, "They killed Daddy. Where's my mommy?" And then the terrorist comes in and casually opens the refrigerator and starts to eat from it.
Yep.
That's what we're dealing with. And it is striking and in some ways shocking that the brutality of the slaughter has receded so quickly in the memories of so many. But not in Israel, and not in America. 35 Americans were murdered that day as well, and more than 200 foreign nationals.
That, you can tell, is really from an uneducated Palestine. If you want to have some kind of peace, if you want to have some kind of resolve, you don't know how powerful the people are that you just killed. You do no idea. You're like, not blaming them for being uneducated, but it shows you how uneducated these people are. Because if you want to win a war, the last thing you do is you kill American civilians. Even if they're 1/10 American and they're 90% Israeli, you made a bad decision. I'm pretty sure the Japanese learned this lesson like real quick, right? So we have to be very aware and like to see how ignorant a lot of these moves are from the Palestinians, and ignorant in the sense of like uneducated desperation.
From 35 countries. I've returned to the region to engage in intense diplomacy with our partners to try to help ensure that an attack like October 7th never happens again. And in doing so, that we forge a different future, a very different future for Israelis and Palestinians alike. That out of this tragedy emerges a better tomorrow.
He's doing the motivation speech. Let's take a look and see, is there anything that is not from a white guy in the United States? Which I know obviously he's got a lot of power in this, and that's not the point of it. It's like, I want to see more boots on the ground stuff. Okay, nothing there. Well, I don't think there's anything to say with this new article other than like, what a shit show. What a mess. I like to try and think of the past and other large wars and other large conflicts as like, how could they have been prevented? And it seems like a conflict like this goes back so far and has so many deep roots and really is unjust on kind of both sides. I want to quote my good Israeli friend who has been very honest about, at least to me in the past, about his thoughts on Palestine. And despite, if you kind of like get rid of it, the one thing that really stood out to me, he said to me he just wants the killing to stop.